Hey there, folks, and welcome to this, our final set review for Opus 20, The Dawn of Heroes. Not a big one with this last video, but hey, we've saved the best for last. Or have we? Well, we're going to have to find out, and I am, of course, joined all the way from Japan by Mr. Eureka himself, Jared Wallace. Jared, how are you, sir?
I'm great. How about you?
Excellent. Thank you for asking. All right, so let's send the Dawn of Heroes out with the dawn and the dusk. Starting with light, this is our final card of the week, Shinryu. This one got a lot of buzz, so curious to see what you think. So he can, of course, get cheaper if your opponent controls 3 or more forwards than you do. So not just 3, they have to control 3 more. So if you have 2, they got to have 5 before you get that cost reduction. He searches any card out. He's clearly meant to feed into his special Tidal Wave, where he just breaks all the forwards your opponent controls. And since he's light, you can technically jam that into any deck. So if you were building a deck and you feel like your color just does not have a board clear, Shinryu is an answer to that. However, as some have pointed out, it's not exactly a cheap board wipe. The special alone is going to cost you 8. Then if you count the Shinryu itself, if it's reduced, it's 10. If it's not reduced, that's 13. That's a bit expensive, and then the Shinryu still has to be in your deck, which also means you have to feed in a bunch of light cards. And so I was like, that's a pricey board wipe. But then I thought, well, what if you ignore that? What if you just play him for the search anything that I need to correct backups or I need to do that? Is it weird to say, though, that, like, I don't know, maybe because that text has gotten more common with things like Charlotta, that, like, it just doesn't feel as special as it once was. So I'll be honest, I don't really know what to think of this card. How do you see it? Do you see it that you do need to play it for the special, the board wipe, or maybe you just go in on the search? Talk to me about Shinryu.
I've heard a lot on both sides of the argument on this one, and I have, in my personal playing with the card, have had nothing but good experiences with it, basically. So I was very surprised because when I read the card, I thought it was going to be awful. I was like, oh, it's Camelot. It's like Camelot, but like 15 sets later or whatever, So I thought it was really, really poor. And then, somebody played the card against me and I was like, oh, this is broken. And then I played the card and I was like, whoa, this is awesome. Like it just felt so good, So I think people are basically ignoring how easy it is to turn on the above text. So when you're playing a control deck of any kind, the top thing is just something your opponent is going to have to think about all of the time. Your opponent can never play 3 forwards to the board if you don't have one, basically, is what that says. And it plays so well with like the same exact play patterns as like mono water, especially, is the big one that I'm thinking of with this card. Is, we have a ton of draw discard effects in there. And, it works with lightning. It's the exact same thing. And you put your opponent in this damned if they do, damned if they don't situation, right? Where you can play a bunch of stuff to the board and then lose to lightning and Shinryu, or you can play very few cards to the board and lose to Atomos and Ash, and that's the kind of thing. And in the meantime, water can just play monsters and continue playing backups and doing just dirtling and doing whatever they want because you're dying to like a single attack every turn from the Echidna. So I think that this card is quite good, especially in mono water. Now, like, the further you get away from exactly mono water, I think the less likely it is to be the right call for your deck. So, like, thinking about some other decks that tend to not play so many backups to the board very quickly, well, 4-color wall is a big one. Earth water can definitely be playing on the back foot. I think Ice Earth is another good candidate for this card. And I think Mono Wind is actually one of the greatest candidates for this card. I know people hate playing light and dark cards in their Mono Wind, and I'm no exception. Don't get me wrong. I'm not very into it. However, there has been I've played maybe a handful of games of it, and basically every time like just thinking about it and I'm noticing, and I didn't have Shinryu in my deck all of those games, but basically every time I was playing the game, unless I was playing against exactly mono water, my opponent always had 3 forwards before I had a single forward. Like, it just never happens that like I have a bunch more going on than my opponent. And in those situations, Shinryu is just a great cast enabler, a board wipe option against those decks. Because especially against like Ice Lightning, where they Reno-Rude you after or whatever, it's very, very quick to get online. It's very deceptive how quick this gets online for 2CP, I think. In terms of like the S ability thing, I think that you should probably play 2 Shinryu when you play 2 Shinryu, just so that you have the option to do it, because people say that 6 plus the S and the cost of Shinryu is too much.
Yeah.
I think it's not quite as much as you would think when you're killing like 4 forwards or like 3 to 4 forwards at the same time. It's really not a bad deal most of the time. You end up having a board advantage and being mostly even, depending on how much they discarded you or whatnot. Yeah. So obviously going to be a little more difficult to do against specifically Ice Lightning when they've like Weissed you or something like that. However, if you're killing like Reno, Rude, Rufus, Weiss, and Faisalis with this, then you're gonna pay 6 to do that, and it's gonna work out for you most of the time. And it leaves a pretty big body on board. A 9K Brave is really nothing to sniff at. Yeah. And when you're playing, Earth, with the Kusith or whatever, they have to think about what happens if they just play a bunch more forwards and you can get another Shinryu and use the S again. So I think I'm higher on this card than most people. It would be my experience. I would be tempted to play this in maybe not my category 4 Cecil strategies as much, but maybe with my mono waters, my mono fires, my mono winds, these kind of slower stuff. Maybe my earth waters, if I'm only playing like Yuna and then like maybe like one other forward to the board, then maybe Shinryu will have his moment to get online. Also, obviously, you can cycle this away. Works really well with Medine, because you can play the Shinryu, and then if they one of the big problems with Terra was you'll play the Terra, try to go get the Medine, and then they'll kill it, and then the Medine isn't going to work, so you have to search something else. Yeah. But when you search any card in your deck, you just say, okay, yeah, we're good, and then you can and then if they kill it on the stack, obviously 5 CP 9K not pretty difficult to kill at instant speed compared to the 7K body that Terra has. But also just in general, like if they do kill it, you can just opt to get, the next best, like Shantoto or, whatever it is. So I am a lot higher on this than a lot of the other players that I've talked to. But it's obviously, I don't think it's a 10 out of 10 card. Obviously, the downsides are written right there on the card. So.
Dude, that was a great assessment, and that makes me really happy. I hope you're right, because it's got cool art, and it was a neat effect that made me think about it a lot. So I want to see it do really well. So I'm rooting for you, Shinryu. Who I'm also rooting for, Materia. So I don't really care for crystals, and I have no desire or plan to play crystals this set, or really any set that I can think of. But you know what? I still love this card because I wanted them to have this just continuous generator that, I had to see these specific backups. I no, here's a card. If you want to make crystals, sir, here's all take them all. Just take all the crystals you can handle. Kind of weird it doesn't have the Cosmos clause that, why can't she be played, once there's already, I don't know, would that have been too strong? I don't think so. But then again, you don't have to play other light cards with this. Maybe you just ignore that part of the text and just say, again, I'm here for the crystals, similar to Spiritus. So yeah, again, crystals aren't really my thing, but if you're going all in the crystals, I really like this backup. I think it's just, what more could you want if you're trying to be the crystal person?
Right. Yeah, I think that the backup is great. My biggest gripe about this is just it's just unsearchable, and you're definitely right that we talked about Shinryu, search any card, However, if you search for this, then you already have Shinryu in play, and you can't play the Materia because she's lacking that key piece of text. Now, maybe there's some funky stuff going on where you Shinryu for Cosmos and you play some of these light cards, but it's a little difficult to get behind, I think. However, the as a generic crystal card, the card is just fantastic. I have so much trouble when I'm planning with this and Spiritus, who we'll get to in a moment. How many of these am I allowed to put in my deck? How am I supposed to get rid of them? There's a lot to think about when you're going for this. And, crystals have become pretty easy to generate with Cecil at this point. So I think I'm not very tempted to play this card in just a generic water crystal deck. However, that's not because it's not good. It's just because it's difficult to use properly and get onto the field.
Yep. Same. Well, let's talk about our counterpart. We're already done with Light. Move on to Spiritus himself. A lot of big, sexy chests. I said in this set. This dude is just buff. He's been working out. He needs to show me his total gym. Pretty similar. Obviously, they do have different effects. I do kind of like Materia a little better. So I like that Materia can just generate it with the CP, whereas you have to spend 2 in a specific turn to get it back.
Right.
Someone pointed out Lady Lilith is a really good combo with that because she spends 2 to break something. He's then going to immediately refund you 1, which is nice. Of course, Glaciella is always happy to just machine gun down a board, and he's just going to keep feeding hers. And I feel like they go a lot farther with her too than anyone else. Again, like you said, you kind of want to play 3 because if it's a big part of your engine, you got to get it on there. I find his action ability a little lacking. It's not that 5,000 powers is anything to sneeze at. It's not. It's really not. But it only works against damage-based removal. So if they're playing a Tomos or a Bounce or a Break, then the power is kind of meaningless. So I do like Materia a little better, but Spiritus is still, again, if you're going in on that Crystal engine, he's a cool card.
Yeah, I think, the really interesting part of this is, obviously if your deck really, really wants to play a specific light or dark forward, you only have one choice for which one of these you're going to play. However, if that's not the case, then how do you choose between Spiritus and Materia? I think that's going to be a pretty interesting dynamic throughout the course of the set. So I think you're very right when you say, Glaciella, Lady Lilith, Lena is another one that comes to mind. These decks that make and spend tons of crystals, they probably benefit a little bit more from Spiritus. However, Materia is consistent, and you can kind of float your mana and play a little bit more control-y. So I tend to think that for the most part, I think Spiritus is a little better for the powerful crystal cards because, and those are the ones that are going to want to play these back a little bit more. Yeah. However, Materia is just a very nice, consistent card. And also, I think in general, right now, light cards look to be a little bit more powerful than dark cards are. Although, depends on, if you're playing Chaos Arc, obviously that's not going to do the same thing. But, there you go.
Well, let's finish off with our dark forward of this set. Riding on Shinryu into battle. This is Xenos. I love this art, man. There's the moon behind him, his outfit, and his face. He's just got this smirk on that just looks like I'm here to destroy you. And the card is cool as neat. So you can cast him straight from the break zone, and there's no restriction, no fancy ace, but you got to throw your whole hand out. You got to do all this nonsense. Just cast him from the break zone. Yeah, he's going to remove afterwards, but it just kind of gives it this extra little flavor. And his entry effects, of course, are quite good as well. Break a forward of 3 or less. And then also, assuming that forward's going to die, you can either have him discard or he's just going to go in for a point of damage. If he comes from the break zone, he's out of there afterwards. But again, he did what you wanted him to. Now, if you're playing your light or dark card of choice, which do seem less and less play, to me, the one I compared him the most to was Tidus from last set. Tidus also costs 4. Tidus has an EX burst. Tidus can hit 5 or less. And technically, you could argue putting them back into the deck is better than them putting in the break zone where they can be revived. Tidus can also revive himself, but not nearly as easily as Xenos. So I like all the text on Xenos. Am I going to pick him over one of the others? That I don't know. But I do like all of his text, and he's cool. I don't know. How do you see Xenos?
Yeah, I like this. I think it's a little bit better than Tidus for me most of the time. Tidus is obviously better against the generic field when you want to be able to hit Bismarcks and whatever. But I think that against the kinds of decks that these kinds of cards like Xenos and Tidus are good against, Xenos is a lot better bang for your buck. Obviously, 3 or less is not going to hit, the Rufus, the Weiss, stuff like that. That's where the Tidus is going to be better. However, Xenos is a 4 CP 9K, and that is a pretty big improvement over Tidus's 8K.
Yeah.
Matters a lot when you're playing against, the black belt mirrors and stuff like that. So I think you're more likely to want that. Additionally, I think the effect of making your opponent discard a card cannot be understated in aggro. When you're playing against 13 and they turn 1 Vanille Hope you, and you play the Xenos and you break the Vanille, that is back-breaking for the 13 player. Like, yeah, they can discard the not lightning if they, you know, have one extra card in their hand. They can discard the card that isn't lightning, and then suicide their hope into the Xenos, and then draw an extra card off the lightning. And when they do, they'll have one card in hand lightning, and then you could just cast Xenos back from the break zone and break the lightning and get rid of the last card. I really think that the discard cannot be overstated. I think that is a very, very important part of what makes this card good, and obviously the cast part is great. Additionally, very, very small text stuff is, while it's true that when Xenos is removed from the when you cast him from the break zone, he gets removed at the end of the turn. That's not a restriction that applies if you just like bounce him back to your hand or whatever. So I think it works really, really well with Sahagin Chief and like Chocobo and stuff like that. So you can cast him from your break zone and then bounce him back yourself and just use him again later. He's not necessarily gone for good when you do it like that.
Doesn't have that syntax. Good point.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut your point off there.
Oh, no, that's basically it. That was my last little tech for it. So.
Awesome. Well, in that case, you know what that means, folks. We are done with Opus 20, Dawn of Heroes. Jared, I want to give a big thank you to you for joining me for these. I always love having you on, hearing your perspective, hearing the L3, the L6, things around Japan. We're kind of wrapping up here, folks. So, Jared, is there anyone you want to give a shout out to, plugs you want to do?
Oh yeah, well, shout out to my whole team. You know, TCG Crystarium is where we write out and put out all of our publications. I think Jeff Lossley is going to have his limited review up pretty soon if it's not getting there already. So look forward to that. And, you know, thanks for having me on as always.
Absolutely. We've got a link to Crystarium in the description below. Leave any comments. Let me know what cards are your favorites that you're looking the most forward to, you're not looking forward to. Feel free to give me predictions for the competitive season too. Like, do you think we're going to see similar cards in the meta, or do you think some of these are going to really shake it up and maybe we're going to see some brand new decks? Always happy to hear all that. Like, subscribe, all that great stuff. Enjoy Opus 20. Best of luck to everyone who competes in the tournaments. And until next time, take care.
Have a good one, guys.